Hi guys, welcome back to the usual place. Now, leader of the opposition and Workers' Party chief Pritam Singh has been enmeshed in a saga that started in Parliament in 2021 with a lie by former WP MP Raeesah Khan. Now, that led to a Committee of Privileges inquiry, which then led to a court case and then to the Court of Appeal. Yesterday, 5 years later, the matter returned to Parliament with Mr Singh's suitability as the leader of the opposition, the crux of the debate. Now, during the sessions, two arguments arose. Leader of the House, Indrani Raja, said Mr Singh had lied repeatedly, was convicted for it, and failed as a leader. But Mr Singh disagreed that his behaviour was dishonourable and unbecoming, and said he disagrees with the courts and the COP's findings. Now, Parliament went on to approve the motion that Mr Singh was unsuitable to continue as leader of the opposition. What happens now for Mr Singh and the Workers' Party? Does he get removed as leader of the opposition? And can the party emerge unscathed? Now, to help me answer that question, I have Peh Shing Huei, a regular commentator on Singapore politics and a former ST News editor. He's also the founding partner of content agency The Nutgraf and author of several books about politicians and people in government. Thank you for being here, Peh.
Thanks for having me. Good to be back in ST.
Yes, in the building. Yes, welcome back. And next to you on the couch is also someone who's no stranger to the usual place, and it's a SMU Associate Professor of Law, Eugene Tan, a political analyst and former nominated MP. So welcome, both of you.
Delighted to be here.
Yeah, we've got a lot to get through today, but I want to start with how the debate went down in Parliament yesterday. About 3 hours long, and the speakers who spoke on the matter were clearly split into two camps, as I mentioned. But I want to get what's your take on the debate. So maybe we'll start with you, Peh.
Sure, sounds good. I would say that it pretty much followed the script. The motion was carried. Again, no surprise, because the ruling party with an overwhelming number of seats in Parliament did not lift its whip, and so clearly the motion would be carried. What was interesting was that the Workers' Party did lift its whip, but all its members of Parliament, including its sole attending NCMP, also voted all in line with against the motion. So I think it followed the script, and is really not much of a surprise that we see on one hand the ruling party MPs saying what they said, and then you have the Workers' Party putting up a very stout defence of their leader. Yeah.
Were you expecting before the debate actually that the PAP would lift the whip, or this is like not a surprise for you?
I saw some comments online that perhaps that can be done, but looking at it, usually the PAP does not lift its whip unless it's a matter of conscience or something like that. This is not an issue that would fall into that category at all. I mean, it's quite clear from the way that, if you see how the leader of the House spoke yesterday, that this is very much along party lines. She used we quite a bit. We did it this way. We have not asked for his resignation yet. And so if this is an issue that is pretty much along party lines, then I did not expect the whip to be lifted at all. Okay. Yeah.
Eugene, you're nodding. Do you agree with it?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, the fact that the debate and the outcome, flowed into partisan lines, it shouldn't surprise us. It also shouldn't surprise us that the ruling party did not lift the party whip. It seldom does. It rarely does. Perhaps only 2 or 3 occasions, over the last 60 years. And the fact that the WP lifted its whip, again, was not surprising to me. Because I think that the WP wanted it to be performative, right? The idea that our MPs have the freedom to say what they want to say. But it shouldn't surprise us, that no Workers' Party MP spoke in favour of the motion. It shouldn't surprise us. But I thought what was interesting was, given that there is that ongoing disciplinary panel, that all 11 Workers' Party MPs, who were present, indicated their dissent. Most, if not all of them, are also on the Workers' Party Central Executive Committee. So I don't know whether that gives us an indication of, how things might pan out with regard, to the party's own internal disciplinary inquiry. But I would also quickly add that it wasn't a good day at the office for Parliament. Let me
In what
explain.
sense? Yeah.
I think not because debate was along partisan lines. I think that's to be expected. But I thought the way the Workers' Party went about the debate. I mean, yes, we were expecting to put up the stout defense, as Peh pointed out. But I think how you go about it, right? So for me, the biggest one was, Pritam Singh sort in a way indicating that he doesn't agree with the court judgment now, right? So for someone who has said that he accepts the judgment, the reasoning, the verdict without reservations, for now to say that, well, I might be legally guilty, but factually I'm innocent, right? So and of course, the numerous points of order that the Workers' Party threw in, the what I thought were low blows, in below the belt when former Speaker Tan Chuan Jin's matter was raised, and then of course, the another below the belt was the question of whether SPS Syed Harun, the former NMP who became a PAP MP, whether he should talk about integrity. I mean, these were issues that were really peripheral, to what was on the motion. So I think taken as a whole, it's. I thought it wasn't a good day for Parliament, for parliamentary politics.
So I think it's like a very good setup to what happened yesterday. And I want to ask you, going back to what you said about what Mr. Singh said about, there's a court judgment, but I believe I'm innocent. And if I can tell you what he said a criminal conviction does not negate one's right to assert innocence. And he also said, in my case, my conscience will always be clear insofar as my conviction on both charges is concerned. So essentially what he says is that the court can find him guilty, but he disagrees with the judgment, which he said as much. How does this work? Does the law allow space for someone to disagree with a judgment? And
Certainly, right? Yeah. I mean, you can disagree, with the verdict, but you cannot. But
he's making it his argument now.
Yes, yeah. I mean, it's quite clear, right? So for Pritam, the court of public opinion is a big thing, but it's also clear that the court of personal conscience is also a big thing, right? So long as my conscience is clear, it doesn't matter what the court said about whether I'm guilty or not. I mean, here you have a case, right? In which the courts have found beyond reasonable doubt, that he was guilty of the charges, and I think it just doesn't make sense, to say that, I'm factually innocent, right? Because the public prosecutor had this high burden, right, of proving the charges beyond reasonable doubt. The judge at the district court, the appeal judge at the high court, were equally persuaded, right, that the public prosecutor had proved his case beyond reasonable doubt. So we now have this situation where, he's saying one can be legally guilty, but one can be factually but innocent. I mean, for someone who was trained in law, and I would disclose, he was in my class for constitutional and administrative law. It just doesn't make sense. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. And of course, the other point about Parliament being supreme, is again, that's not the Singapore system. In Singapore, the Constitution is supreme. You're asking effectively the Speaker to overrule, to say that, just go against the courts, notwithstanding the undertaking you had given about certain documents, you are at liberty because you are supreme, Parliament supreme, you can allow those documents to be shared in Parliament.
Yeah.
If I may just jump in here and putting back on my hat as a journalist, because I just can't help myself. I feel like asking Eugene a question now.
Yes, please.
Yes. Just can't help myself. I'm sorry. I don't think that's what I'm here for, but yeah.
Don't steal my job now. But
exactly.
yes, go ahead.
Sorry,
yes,
Natasha.
Yes.
Yeah. He raised an interesting counterpoint in a way yesterday, Pritam Singh, when he brought up the case of President Tharman, right? And how in 2023, 3 years ago, when campaigning to be president, Mr. Tharman talked about his previous conviction for the Official Secrets Act. and what Mr. Tharman said to the media at that point. So from a layman understanding, you would probably look at it and go, hey, that does make sense. I'm just curious, Eugene, how should we process this, right? Because that was indeed said by then candidate Tharman on the record.
No, I think you raise a good point, right? So here, when the charges that Mr. Pritam Singh, was convicted of, required both, the guilty act as well as the guilty mind, right? And I have not had a chance to look at the Official Secrets Act, right? But my understanding is that what Mr. Tharman Shanmugaratnam, when he was then at the Monetary Authority of Singapore, was convicted of, was an offence, that required the prohibited act, in this case, not being careful with classified material, but it didn't require the guilty mind, which was that, you wanted to share, those classified information with someone who was not authorized to receive them, right? So to me, it was a disingenuous comparison, right? Because one required that both the guilty act and the guilty mind, and so in other words, right, one simple way of putting it is that Mr. Tharman's conviction, right, was for a technical offense, right? You didn't take care with classified documents. It doesn't matter whether you have, the guilty intent to do so. In law we call it a strict liability offense. So again, I think there was an attempt to prey on people's lack of awareness of what were the issues. What is the law. In a way, obfuscating the issues, going away from what was really the issue at hand.
So, sorry, Paige, you want to say?
No, sure. I'm done with the questioning. Back to you, Nat.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so what we were going to say is that, after all of what happened in Parliament was ended there, the WP almost seemed defiant. I'm not sure if you saw on Instagram, but last night they actually put out this video on social media with the hashtag "We will continue," because it plays on, well, it's not a play, but in Parliament they were saying that we will continue to work for our constituents and we'll continue to work for the people who support us, essentially saying that they will continue their work. I'm not sure if you all saw it, but what do you think of that? Like, they came out with this show of, resilience in a way after what happened in Parliament, yeah.
Again, I would say that that's not really surprising. I mean, the Workers' Party playbook in many ways, if you the communication strategy has always been to play up the fact that they are underdogs, they are underwhelmed, underrepresented rather in Parliament. And in fact, the numbers do back that up. I mean, you only have 10 MPs versus 87 on the other side. So visually, you have very few against a lot more on the other side of the aisle. And to stand up and make that show, I would agree with Eugene here that yes, very much of what Workers' Party did yesterday in Parliament was, in a way, a performance. Subsequently putting things up online, clearly reaching out to the ground, reaching out to their voters in particular, and saying that, hey, we know what this is said, but we believe that you guys are still on our side and we will stand strong. And that pretty much came through in many of their speeches, especially Pritam's, when he said that whatever it is, you guys want to take away the leader of opposition, I'm still going to be MP, I'm still going to walk the ground, I'm still going to serve the people. So again, very clear, making that connection directly to the ground, directly to the people, and in particular, directly to their voters. Yeah.
And moving to the other side of the house, when Ms. Indrani actually called it a failure of leadership on Mr. Singh's part, right? Actually, why do you think she went with this approach? Because it also opens up the PAP to having to answer for their shortcomings. As Eugene mentioned, Mr. Tan Chuan Jin was brought up, and then the former NMP also, now PAP MP, had to answer for that change. The way I understand it is that it's pretty straightforward, right? I mean, this is a motion to, in a way, recommend the removal or not of the leader of opposition title and role. So we are talking about leadership here. And this has been an incident that has been bubbling along for, 5 years now, right? It's been a long, long time. But
and not over.
And not over.
Yet.
And perhaps many of us, after a while, we forget that this was an issue that was with Raeesah Khan to begin with. What was Pritam's involvement in this as a leader? as the mentor to Raeesah as the leader of Workers' Party. So I don't think it is surprising in that sense for the leader of the House, Ms. Indrani, to go with that angle, even though, as you have correctly pointed out, it does open up to a certain comeback from the Workers' Party, and they did take that shot fairly quickly, right? Whether it's on the, and I think particularly centered on the Mr. Tan Chuan Jin incident.
Well, I think leader of the House certainly would have anticipated that coming, right? But I think Peh rightly pointed out, this was a question of Pritam's suitability, right, to continue as the leader of opposition. So not only was there, that court convictions of lying, to the Committee of Privileges, but there was this gross failure, right, in leadership, right? How do you guide, a first-time MP? And of course, Ms. Raja also pointed out how, when the disciplinary panel for Ms. Raeesah Khan, the WP leaders, Mr. Pritam Singh, Ms. Sylvia Lim, and Mr. Faisal Manap, all of them who were then in Parliament, in the 14th Parliament, did not disclose, the fact that of the background, to Ms. Khan's case. Why did the untruth remain as such, for more than 2 months?
I mean, I want to touch on the issue of Mr. Tan in particular. So for some context, Mr. Tan resigned in 2023 after an extramarital affair with a fellow MP. So the rebuttal there is that what he did was not a criminal offence, even though it happened in Parliament, and he was not found guilty by a court, right? So did WP's Kenneth Tiong, who made that speech about Mr. Tan, did he make the right move in bringing it up, and did Ms. Indrani's rebuttal actually settle it? What do you, let's pay? Let's get your thoughts first.
Well, I would say that Ms. Indrani Raja made a strong rebuttal, in particular on the point that Mr. Tan Chuan Jin and Ms. Cheng Li Hui both resigned their seat. So was there a need for the Parliament to still talk about these two people? They have taken responsibility for the indiscretions, and they have paid the price. There's this other point which is perhaps not raised by Kenneth Tiong, but somewhat alluded to by Pritam in his speech, which was that, I think he made that point, and correct me if I'm wrong, he said something, I did not have 3 years, right?
Yeah.
Which again was alluding to this particular incident. And I think that comes back to leadership again, which was the question you had posed earlier. That allowed that comeback from Pritam from Workers' Party that, hey, the leadership on the other side with the ruling party in that particular incident wasn't perhaps as persuasive as well, because many would remember that then Prime Minister did say that he gave Mr. Tan Chuan Jin quite a bit of time, amounting to eventually, 3 years to settle that issue. So that comeback was perhaps a result, I would say, that in the eyes of some, hey, maybe that case, maybe that time frame was a little bit too long. Maybe there was too much time given for Mr. Tan to settle his affairs. Right? Yeah.
I think, Eugene, you earlier mentioned you called it a peripheral issue, but to people watching like voters or everyday Singaporeans, they're like, okay, both issues happen in Parliament, but different time frames, different people, the PAP had 3 years, as we just said, that to sort it out, but there was no, there was no airing in Parliament about it, like this issue. So what do you make of it?
Well, I think certainly, the way, the government, under then Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong dealt with the affair of, Mr. Tan Chuan Jin and Ms. Cheng Li Hui, I think they would have probably done it differently with hindsight, right? So I would agree it wasn't, the government at its best. But I think to say that, the PAP government is adopting double standards, I think it's a false equivalence. Why? Here we have Mr. Pritam Singh, being convicted, of perjury charges, right? It's a criminal conviction. Is adultery a crime? Was there any evidence, for example, that Mr. Tan, in his position as Speaker, had abused his office. I mean, if it would be different, let's say, for example, you had a situation where the affair was between, let's say, the Speaker and a staff member of Parliament's Secretariat, right? So I think in trying to say that, I think what the WP was really trying to do, was to say that, look, this is all politicking. This is the PAP trying to take us a notch down. It is about double standards, right? But I think in the end, all that would have resonated with some people for sure, right? And this is really, in a way, the performative part of politics. You try to play to the gallery, but I think making those comparisons, to me, was really a false equivalence, right? And I think it was really an attempt to not dwell, on what the motion, was about.
So, I mean, if you look at the comments online, on Reddit, people are saying things like PAP is flogging a dead horse, pushing its point too far, because as I mentioned, this is played out over 5 years, right? So there is a particular sentiment that some people do see this as bullying by the PAP. And what I'm wondering is that is there going to be a political cost to the PAP for bringing this up in Parliament now, again? Okay.
Well, if there's a cost, I'm not sure if it's something that they will have to pay anytime soon. I mean, this is coming within a year after an incredibly resounding win during the general election 2025. Clearly, I think the voters have sent a very clear mandate to the PAP to govern the way that it wants to have a parliament in a way that is shaped very much by the ethos, the values of this ruling party over the last, 60 years or even longer, right? So I am not so sure whether there's a political cost to be paid by the ruling party. Fatigue, for sure. I mean, in this day of breaking news and things changing by the minute and by the day, for us to still be talking about issue 5 years later, frankly, I would say for many men on the street, it's like, oh my God, you mean you're still not done with this? So fatigue, for sure, right? Political cost, I'm doubtful about that. Having said that, the cost perhaps for the other side, for Workers' Party, we still have not seen how that would play out. In all likelihood, their leader is going to be losing this title of leader of the opposition. So that is a very clear, tangible cost that they're going to be paying perhaps pretty soon. Will there be larger repercussions emerging from within the party? We have yet to see it. But in terms of cost, probably the Workers' Party will be paying more. Yeah.
Natasha, I think whether there is going to be a cost to be paid or not, by the ruling party, we must remember that this particular matter is really an outstanding matter following the report and recommendations of the Committee of Privileges back in 2022, right? And at that time, the 14th Parliament, adopted, resolutions, including, for example, referring both Mr. Pritam Singh and Faisal Manap, to the public prosecutor to see whether crimes were committed under the relevant law. And so now that those matters have been concluded, right, Parliament is coming back to the matters that were held in abeyance. So I think that the PAP would be remiss in their duty if they didn't close the loop. Right? And the matter is not over, right? Because we can be sure that there will be another motion either next month or the month after, that will relate to the role of Ms. Sylvia Lim and Mr. Faisal Manap,
Even if he's not in Parliament?
Yeah, I mean, Raeesah was no longer in Parliament when she was fined, right? So just because you are no longer in Parliament, but so long as those dishonourable conduct or contempt or abuse of privilege, were done during the course of your time as MP, Parliament, has clear jurisdiction, under the law. So I think it's important to recognize, why Parliament was doing that, right? I think it would be a gross failure in leadership, right, if Parliament did not pursue, this particular matter. Right, so Mr. Gerald Giam, for example, from the Workers' Party said, Again, not surprisingly, right? We now have far bigger issues to deal with: jobs, cost of living. Why are we dealing with that? And I would have expected, the Workers' Party MPs to have more honesty, right? That this is really following up, is closing the loop, right? And I think the other thing also is that the sort of balloon that was raised, that are we punishing Pritam Singh twice? So I will put it this way, right? So you could imagine if an employee were to commit a crime at the workplace, right? The courts will have jurisdiction, to deal with that matter. But because those acts were done in the course of employment, right, the company also can deal with the employee subsequently. Right? The employee cannot say, look, I've been dealt with the courts, I paid the fine, I spent time in jail. You cannot dismiss me from employment. Right? So again, there was all this fudging, and it is important to recognize that this particular act, that was really at the center of Raeesah Khan's lies, as well as those involving the WP leaders, the Parliament Privileges, Immunities and Powers Act, is something that enables Parliament, to regulate its own affairs. Right? And this is really about the separation of powers. Right? Now, I don't want to go into the legal niceties, but it is important in any constitutional system for there to be the separation of powers, right? For each branch to be able to discipline themselves so that another branch doesn't have to come in, to so-called get the house in order. So I think it's important to recognize, why these things are taking place. But it doesn't take away from, the primary motivation, of the debate yesterday, right? It was really to underscore the importance of integrity, honesty, accountability and responsibility, expected of all MPs, right? So that whatever Ms. Indrani spoke, would apply equally, to her own party members, to the political office holders, as much as they do to the opposition MPs as well as the leader of the opposition.
So I want to ask about what happened at the end, right? So all the WP MPs yesterday, in Parliament yesterday, voted against the motion, as we said, and they stood up to make their dissent count. It's quite the picture of unity in a way, because all of them were standing up. And yet, at the same time, it has been reported that more than 20 party cadres have called for a special cadre members' conference. There's clearly a split in party opinion here. I mean, what do you both make of it? Are the cracks showing within the party? Is this going to be a divisive issue overall?
I would say that in many cases, as with all political parties, not just in Singapore, it is near impossible that for any political party to be completely united on any one position. The very idea that any party of a sizable membership base would definitely have different opinions. The question here often is that, does it come out to the public? Is the public aware of the schism that happened within the party, or is it able to resolve internally? What we have seen here with this special cadres conference is that it's coming out to the public. So you see that indeed there are certain segments of the Workers' Party that perhaps have some issues with whatever is happening. And so they would like for it to be discussed on a higher level, taken more seriously within the Workers' Party. Not surprising, perhaps, 10 years ago, 2016, there was a very clear challenge of then leader Lau Tia Kiang, right? There was, you could call it a faction maybe, or certainly a group of members who were backing Mr. Chen Shou-Mao at that point to make a bid for the leadership. They failed. Mr. Lau Tia Kiang continued as Sec-Gen, but that made it very, very clear that this is not a party that, everybody shares the same opinion, everybody like the same leaders. And I would say that that is normal. I would say that it's normal. Only thing is that for most of us outsiders, you don't have a sight of what happens within the party, right? But in that instance, in 2016, we saw it. We got a glimpse of it. And again, in this instance. So it should not come as a surprise, and I think that that is normal for any political party. I will venture to say that's pretty much the same for the PAP as well. They have lots of closed-door caucus and stuff like that, where they voice their opinions very openly. But after that, it is always an idea that when we go out to the public, we close ranks, there's only one united position.
Do you think that in this case there will be a challenge for leadership?
It's hard to say at this moment, and I do wonder whether the proceedings yesterday in Parliament might have some sway on some of the Workers' Party members' idea as to what they should do when they eventually have that special conference. How much will they be influenced by it? But certainly, at least among the leadership, and most of these MPs, if not all, are in the CEC of the Workers' Party. Certainly, among the leadership, it seems clear from yesterday's display that they are united behind their present leader. How strong will the other voices be? We can't tell.
I think Pritam's grip on the party is very secure. And I think so long as he continues to have the backing of Mr. Lau Tia Kiang, I can't imagine, there being another leader. Because when you look at the lineup, you ask yourself, who can really challenge Pritam at this point in time, within the Workers' Party. So I think whatever concerns, that will be voiced at a special cadres members conference, I don't think it's going to lead to a leadership struggle. I look at the WP Constitution, and if I understand it correctly, ultimately it is for the CEC to decide what to do, right? After that special conference, right? So the cadres may say, they may even take a vote and say that, let's say for example they want Pritam Singh to be removed, right? But the final decision rests with the CEC, right? And when you look at the sort of unequivocal support yesterday, I think it's going to be. I think we can certainly expect, Pritam, not to be asked to resign, and certainly would not be expelled from the party. He may even continue, as the Secretary General after the disciplinary inquiry. The only question is whether the WP wants to have the leader opposition office, and they can only, in a way, make a case for that if Pritam is no longer the Secretary General.
I do wonder. I mean, I look at. Building on what you just said, Eugene, that if the Workers' Party, if there are members looking to remove Pritam, clearly the immediate question is then who else? Who can replace him? And usually it has to come from your elected MPs, because they are the ones with a seat in Parliament, and more than that, they are the ones with the greatest and perhaps most positive public profiles. And if all those people are already in Parliament, as we saw yesterday, in support of the present leadership, then that alternate leader, the person who might possibly replace Pritam Singh, I don't think is in sight. And without that, how likely would be the rank and file of Workers' Party said, let's get rid of this guy? The probability would be low, in my view. Yeah.
So I also want to ask about voters, right? So there are people who might be disturbed by this whole saga, how long it's played out and how it's played out, and see how the WP is doubling down and think that maybe, they've drunk too much of their own Kool-Aid, right? Do you think the WP needs to address this whole situation with residents and voters and in their constituencies personally? What do you make of it?
Oh, definitely, right. I mean, one cannot deny, that this whole untruth upon untruth upon untruth is an albatross around the WP's neck, right? What's going to work for them is that, they have the political cachet as being the only opposition party in Parliament, right? They have, in a way, a fairly long-standing record, of being a credible opposition party. But I think this particular saga, I've called it Liar's Gate, will be something, that will be very defining of the WP. Right? So if residents, if voters continue to throw their support behind the WP, then it is defining, in that for whatever reasons, voters still think that WP has an important role to play, right? And yesterday they were running that line. We need a balanced parliament, right? But if, let's say, voters start to have doubts about the WP and it results in a lower level of support in the next general election, then that to me will also be defining, right? But it is an Achilles heel, right? Because you cannot. I mean, I don't think the PAP will flog this horse at the next general election, But I would say that the element of doubt, as to whether the Workers' Party leadership is whiter than white, I think that you cannot run away from.
It is an Achilles heel. But looking at the speeches yesterday from the Workers' Party MPs yesterday, they seem to already be indicating that, because this is a long-running saga, this is not something that just popped up yesterday, right? They seem to be already indicating that we have heard you, our residents, our voters. Thank you for your support. I cannot remember. I think it might have been Gerald Giam's speech,
Silva as well. Silva as well.
Already making that claim, right? That, hey, thank you for being behind us. So I'm not sure about having to go out to further explain, because they seem to already be holding that line that you guys knew what's been happening all this while. You've been behind us. Thank you for your support. And perhaps on some level, it is backed up because they did manage to retain alginate GRC in the last GE. And that was after the ruling. Pending the appeal, but that was after the ruling. So I guess the strategy from Workers' Party in terms of communications is already making it very clear that we have the ground support.
A court of public opinion.
Yes. So in particular, with the alginate GRC people, right? They knew what's been happening. It's been 5 years. They're still behind us.
Well, and even within the WP, right? I mean, they had Pritam was re-elected as SecGen in 2023 or 2024, right? When all this was really rumbling through.
Yeah. Exactly.
So I want to ask about Prime Minister Lawrence Wong, because actually he's the only one who decides what to do about the leader of the opposition and his office. And most analysts, including you, Eugene, think that PM Wong will remove Pritam as leader of the opposition. When that happens, how do you think the WP will respond? Oh, so just for some context for people watching, there was an analyst piece today in the Straits Times, which I'll link in the comments in the show notes. But so basically most analysts think that, Pritam will be removed as LO. So how do you think the WP will respond after this?
I think it was very clear from yesterday that, from what Pritam said, that they really expected it. That is, by the time when it happens, and I think most people by now would assume that the Prime Minister is going to remove that title, that role from Mr. Pritam Singh. I think that is, at least to me, pretty much a foregone conclusion. So, and it's very clear from what the Workers' Party said yesterday that they expected it. They expect it, and it's going to happen. And I think he framed it as, after the last general election, he was asked by a reporter about this role, and he said that, it depends on the Prime Minister, because the role given to the Prime Minister, and he made no assumption at that point whether he would get it again, right? So I think that is the line they're going to take, and it's going to be taken away, and we never hanker after it. It's not something that we wanted. It's expected anyway. Otherwise, why have this motion? It is what it is. In his answer, it was very clear. I will still be an MP. I'll still serve my residents. Yeah.
Eugene?
I think it's not a question of whether PM will remove that designation from Pritam Singh. It's a question of when, right? And I think it'll be very swift, right? I think by the end of this week, or even by the end of today.
I think we're talking in terms
hours,
of days.
right? So his hours as LO, are numbered, if I can put it that way. And so we can expect, the leader of the opposition office to be vacant, because by convention, when we look at the UK model from which the leader opposition office in Singapore was designed, it's typically, the leader of the opposition party in Parliament with the most number of seats. But so long as, Pritam remains, the top leader within the WP, and given that he will be removed, PM Wong wouldn't be able to appoint another leader of opposition. But life goes on, right? And already the WP indicated yesterday, right? We continue, right? Pritam will continue to occupy the front row in the opposite aisle. He may not be assigned the seat opposite PM, which is a privilege given to the leader of the opposition, but he is still the leader of the opposition party with the most number of seats. In fact, he's the leader of the only opposition party in Parliament, right? So things are going to soldier on. They've already indicated as such, but I think the loss of the extra support, from having the LO having staff, extra allowance, the ability to sit across the Prime Minister, having extra speaking time and all. I think that's something that they will miss, because it means that they will not have that ability, to project their voice, as they were able to over the last 5 years.
So, Peh, as you said, like they already had this foregone conclusion that this role will be taken away. Why do you think he didn't resign? Because if they knew it was going to happen, why do you think he just didn't resign?
Well, I think that, again, the party, Workers' Party, made it quite clear yesterday that they disagree with this. And if they had resigned, that would be an admission that they agree that mistakes were made and that he doesn't deserve this role. That is pretty clear, right? You could make a case that it is actually easier to just resign, right? But the narrative would change pretty dramatically if he had done that, right? Instead, this current narrative is one that, as you mentioned earlier, we're bullied. We're bullied.
It's a fix. They were fixed.
And again, I come back to this whole thing about the narrative of the Workers' Party, very much the underdog. So to not resign would stay unmessaged for the Workers' Party.
So I want to round off this conversation by asking, so if the LO office is taken away, what does this mean for Singapore politics going forward? Because Eugene, as you explain what this office does and how it has actually, given them extra resources and time in Parliament, if it's taken away, what does this mean for the conversations in Parliament or for Singapore politics in general? Yeah, maybe.
I don't think it will change in any significant way. Right? I think the battle lines have already been clearly drawn way before yesterday's debate on the motion. I think the WP will continue, its narrative. Right, we need a balanced parliament. We will continue to provide that robust checks and balance. We cannot allow one party to be so dominant, such that they can bully, the others. So I think as I said, the WP has that political cachet, right, as being the only opposition party. Right, and I think most Singaporeans will say, well, on balance, right, it'd be good to have more opposition than fewer opposition, right? So long as they are still able to maintain, that minimum level of credibility, I think WP is still very much in the game, but it's something that I think will hang heavily. Over them, right? Because it'd be very hard to stand up in Parliament, and say we want to be a robust check when you have not even met, certain minimum standards. But they have time, right? They have time. The Parliament has 5 years. They have only just sort of gone into it's not even 6 months, right? Parliament started only in September, right? So it's still early days. They have time to repair, to rebuild that trust and confidence. And of course, in Singapore politics, when the PAP is so dominant, all the good and all the bad, will be ascribed, to the ruling party. Right? So I think that they have still a lot going. I just felt that, it would have been better. I think it would have gone down well, with the fair-minded Singaporean, had they acknowledged, that they fell short, because they still have that political cachet, right? And Singaporeans recognize that political diversity and competition, particularly by a credible opposition party, on balance, would be beneficial to Singapore.
Okay.
I will say that the leader of opposition is a fairly new addition to our political landscape. It's only been around till today, just short of 6 years, if I'm not wrong, right? It came out as a result of GE 2020, when then Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong, well, I would say surprised quite a few people with this announcement, with this title, with this role that was given to Pritam Singh at that point. I think it's useful to take a step back and say that, and look at Parliament and ask ourselves, what is the most important metric in a way in Parliament? And it's actually the number of seats. So I've always believed that if you look at GE 2020, it's not so much the appointment of Pritam Singh as leader of opposition that mattered, but rather the addition of 4 new seats for the Workers' Party at that general election that would perhaps have make a bigger difference to our Parliament, especially in the context of Singapore politics post-independence, when there had always been very, very few opposition MPs. So I think that role, that addition of 4 seats through Sengkang GRC made a bigger difference. That hasn't changed. So yes, there's a blow. The title will most likely be removed. They're going to lose some privileges, but Workers' Party still have 10 MPs in the House. And that is the most important thing, because they have 10 voices, they have 10 votes.
12, actually.
12 now, if you include
the
NCMP.
NCMPs,
Yes. I'm not including the NCMP because, only talking about the ones that won their seats. I think that is the most important measure. And to echo what Eugene said, life goes on. They still have those 10 plus 2 seats going on in this Parliament, and barring anything that should happen coming out of Workers' Party, that remains the case. And they can then make a case for what Gerald Giam talked about yesterday, the jobs, the lives, the cost of living, and perhaps in the eyes of many Singaporeans, that is what we want to see from Workers' Party. How well can you represent the Singaporeans, especially your voters, on these critical issues?
All right. So on that note, thank you both for the thoughts and the conversation. So the next step, I guess, we'll see what happens, whether PM will come out with a statement soon, anytime soon, to see.
Eugene thinks hours, yeah.
Okay.
Maybe days, I don't know,
Okay.
but I think the consensus is pretty soon, yeah?
All right. So we'll see what happens. But thank you both for being here today.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
that's it from The Usual Place. Now, if you're watching us on YouTube, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so that you won't miss the next episode. And if you have thoughts on what we discussed today, do drop a comment on YouTube or talk to me on Instagram at The Usual Place Podcast. I'll see you next week on Thursday at noon.